Hi guys, Samantha from Tutorials here, and today I'm going to be playing around with an idea I have for a pendant that is somewhat similar to this. Basically, we're going to be working with some silk screens, metal leaf, alcohol inks, and all sorts of things, but we're going to be kind of copying the shape of this pendant. However, it is not going to look the same. So this is kind of a over my shoulder, let's see how we go tutorial. Let me know if you like these tutorials once you've finished watching, because they are quite fun to make, and I thought that it might be helpful to see my creative process behind the tutorials, where I actually talk you through my ideas. So let me know in the comments if you are interested in more videos like this. So what I have here is a sheet of Polymer that has been rolled out to about 1.5 millimeters thick, or the third setting on my pasta machine, third thickest setting, and I'm just burnishing it between two pieces of paper so that it is nice and smooth. And what we're going to do with this is we are going to texture it. So it's given the back a nice smooth imprint, but even if you're going to texture, you should burnish your clay first, because it removes any roller lines and fingerprints, things like that, that might get missed by your texture. And now I have an aquarium filter sponge here, and this is going to give me a nice, really basic texture. Something else that you could use is coarse sandpaper, that will work as well. Just make sure you get a nice, even coat of that texture. There we go. Alright. Now, a silk screen that I'm going to be working with, and now first off, before I say anything else, what we're making over here is this top part of the pendant. So I'm going to be working with Moiko's 6.3 silk screen, as you can see here. And I actually sell this one on my Etsy shop, if you want to check it out. What we're going to do is we're just going to take this out, and I'm just going to lay that on. And now, because of the texture, we want to burnish this on pretty decently so that it sticks, and this will flatten out the texture a little bit, which is fine. You can retexture a bit afterwards, but there we go. We want that to be on properly so that it doesn't have the paint leak through. Then I'm going to be using a really nice thick silver paint. If you've textured your clay before silk screening, you really want to make sure that your paint is nice and thick, because it will mean that your paint is less likely to run under the silk screen and will go where you want it to go. So I've just got that at the beginning of the silk screen, and I'll just swipe that across and make sure that I work that through the screen. Okay. Then we'll lift this up, and I'm going to wash this off immediately after I have picked it up. There you go. Now go wash that off. Okay, and that's going to have given us a very basic outside print. Now I'm going to just take this blade and I'm going to slide it under the paper, well, not under the paper, under the clay, and just pick that up. Okay, and you can see that we have retained a lot of that texture, and it just gives it a really nice, interesting effect. Now, we're not going to use this right now, so put this to the side, and we will get back to that in a little while. Now, bring over another piece of black rolled out on the same setting as the previous one. We are going to burnish that. Thoroughly. Then I'm going to bring over some silver leaf. This one I also carry on my Etsy shop, Jessima Design, but any silver leaf will work. Take this, and I'm going to see if I can work it off here very carefully. This one is a little thicker than other silver leaves, so you can actually manipulate it by hand. It's not quite as easily fragmented as the other leaves. So it will fragment, as you can see there, if you're not careful. Okay, then just smooth that onto the surface burnish it on so it's stuck down properly. Right, there we go. Now I just want to show you the silkscreen we're going to be working with. This is another Mocha one. This is the 12.44, as you can see. We're not going to do that right now though. We first want to work with some alcohol inks, and I'm going to be using these ones over here, as you can see. So open them away from your clay, because generally if you've used an alcohol ink before, there will be alcohol ink dried around the cap, and you don't want those little crumbly bits to get onto your clay. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the green one, and all I'm going to do is, in no particular fashion, I'm just going to drop this onto my metal leaf. Okay, then give that a moment or two to dry before adding this one. Okay, and there we go. Let me just shift that around so you can see how that looks. Now I'm going to bring over the blue, and I'm going to drop that on as well. And I am nearly out of this colour. As you can see, it's not dropping out anywhere near as much, which is actually something that I quite want. Okay, and then I'm actually going to use a brush to brush that over the surface. And I'm just using it to cover up any silver areas, like so. Okay, and I will continue doing that until I've used up, until I've brushed out all the ink. And then allow that to dry, and while that is drying we can move on to working with our previous sheet. Okay, so the paint on this will have dried, as you can see, and I'm really happy with how that texture has come out. It really looks quite nice. So now you can use Sculpey's hollow bead maker if you want, but I'm going to be just using this bowl that I have here actually, and I'm going to position this in a way that I'm going to be able to get a few different patterns out of this. Now I'm just using my hands to very gently manipulate this down onto the bowl. Now don't worry, we're not going to be baking this entire sheet. I am just popping it down, and then we will actually cut it out once it has been stuck down. Okay, and I'll actually come in with this, and I use this to press down a little harder because I don't want to mess up my texture by using my hands too much. Okay, then I'm going to bring over my circle cutters. So this is the whole set. Okay, and I'm going to be using my second largest one to actually cut out the piece, but because we need a hole, as you can see here, actually we might end up using the largest one, we'll see, but because we need a hole in the middle, I don't want to cut out the largest one first, because then you will find that finding the middle is quite difficult, and you will end up with it being off to the side more often than not. So I'm just going to take this, and now I want to find the top of this little bowl actually has a flat spot, and so I want to try to cut there. So give me a moment to eye this. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that placement. Now I'm going to cut, spin to make sure it's nice and clean on the bottom. Then we'll bring over the next one, and then again we're going to eyeball this. Okay, that looks to be about in the middle. and we're going to cut. Spin to make that nice and clean. Okay. Then I'm just going to use a craft knife to pick this out. And now, because we used so little silver, if you do happen to mess this up and it's not in the right position, you can always just squiffle this up again and roll it out through the pasta machine and try again. That is something you can always do. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to just bring over this, and I'm just going to quickly retexture in case I did get any flat spots. I'm not pressing very hard because I don't want to distort it, but there we go. Okay, now I'm double checking that I'm all very happy with this before I put it into the oven. So now it's going to go into the oven for at least 40 minutes at your brand's recommended temperature. I'm using Primo, so it will go in at Primo's recommended temperature. And then when this is baked, we'll be able to apply it to our next veneer. Okay, now I've got this piece over here, and it's mostly dry, but just to make sure that it is completely dry, as you can see there are some spots that are not dry. I'm very gently going to lay a piece of paper over the top, and I'm going to dry it off. Now that will pick up pieces of leaf, but that is fine. I quite like that it's going to have some areas that are a little bit that will show through the black. If you don't want that, then don't dry it off, but then you're going to have to wait a fair amount longer to make sure that it's completely dry before you place your silk screen onto this. Okay, now I'm going to just grab my silk screen. It will come up the back, there we go. And it's this really nice fish scale pattern. I'm just going to place that down. And I'm going to burnish fairly hard because it's on, we have metal leaf here, and metal leaf is pretty, what do you say? It's not very sticky. It's not exactly like polymer clay where the silk screen will stick automatically. So just make sure that you burnish that on decently so that it's pretty well stuck before moving on to the next step. Now I have a little bit of this paint still left on my scraper because I used quite a bit on the last one. So instead of putting a new line across, I'm going to use this. But if you didn't have extra paint, you could always just put another line of paint on. There we go, because I did not want to waste that. Okay, and just making sure that I get everywhere. Okay, and then lift this up and go clean the silk screen. Okay, now I've cleaned up that silk screen. Now you might have seen that a little bit of the metal leaf actually came up with the silk screen. Now that's not a big problem. The metal leaf is very delicate, so if you do find that it comes off, just use your finger and scrape a little bit. You can even use a toothbrush to gently scrape off the metal leaf. It will come off very easily. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. So you can see here how it has a nice sheen to it. I'm trying to direct that. There we go. You can see it has a nice sheen. Some areas are plain silver, some areas have a little bit of black, some blue, some green. It's a really nice, interesting combination. And basically that is what is going to be the center of our piece over here. So now I want you to lift this up off of the paper because we do not want it to, we don't want the polymer clay's oils to be leached out by the paper while our other piece is in the oven. So you can see there already that it's been leaching out some of the oils. It's not a huge problem in the short term, but long term you don't want that to happen. So I'm going to put this to the side and we will come back and we will use it when our other piece has finished baking. Okay, and lastly I just want to point out that you should make another sheet of black, this time rolled out to at least half a millimeter thick, no thicker than a millimeter, and this is going to be our backing. I have silk screened it the exact same as the front. You can see that the pattern is a little more heavy handed than last time as I scraped over with the paint more times, so that's something to keep in mind when you're doing your silkscreen work. If you scrape once or twice, it's going to end up being very nice and thin, like over here. If you scrape multiple times, you're going to end up with this much bolder pattern, so that's something to keep in mind. But anyway, I've made this for the backing. It's got the texture same as the previous one. I'm going to put this to the side and we will use this later on, but it's just nice to make it right now so that paint can dry. Okay, and here it is out of the oven. So you can see that I got that in the middle. It looked a little bit weird on the pot the way it was, because of this little bit over here. It was kind of sitting off to the side like this, so this pot, the little flat bit, wasn't quite in the middle, but I got that very well into the middle. So now you can see how that looks. It looks really quite nice. So now I'm going to just use a craft knife just to get any little bits that we might have along this edge. We might have just a touch that just needs to be shaved away. You can use sandpaper if you're not confident using your blade, but really they're so thin that they will just shave right off. Okay, and that will just tidy up. And that's about the extent of the sanding we're actually going to have to do with this piece. So next part is going to be to bring over this piece here. And now I actually want to be doing this on a tile that I can bake on so that I don't have to move this. It will be much better. So I'll just bring this over. And I'm not too worried about the back of this because we are going to apply a backing later on. So place this down. And this appears to be quite dry, so I want to grab a piece of plain printing paper so that I can just burnish that nicely so that it doesn't have any fingerprints or anything like that. And it'll also burnish it onto the tile so it sticks down nicely. Okay, and I'm going to lift that carefully. It might lift up a little bit of ink, but shouldn't lift up too much. Just want to make sure that I get a nice flat pattern. Okay. Then bring this over, and you can see there how nice that is going to look. I'm quite happy with that area right there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to press down on these edges so that you actually embed this piece into the clay. We don't need liquid clay. If you are not confident that this will be held by your clay, you can always just put a little bit of liquid clay around the edge, but I find that it isn't really necessary. Just pressing down and around these edges here works pretty well. And I was a little worried that the silver wasn't going to stand out. Oops, that it wasn't going to stand out nicely, and so I was debating on using gold, but my final thought process on that was that we shouldn't really use gold because we have used silver on the outside. So if you wanted to use gold, keep with the silver leaf of course, but put the paint in here gold, but then you also want to make sure that this paint on the outside here is gold. So if you wanted to do that, you could of course try that out. Now I could use my cutter, but I don't think I'm going to. This might actually stick in the cutter, so what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to go around my craft knife. Once you get going, it should be pretty easy. And this is another reason why you should use a separate tile. Now I'm just going around a few times just to make sure that I've got a nice clean cut. Okay, now there might be one or two edges that need to be tidied. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to be smoothing some clay around the edge here, so if it's not completely perfect, that's fine. Just use your blade to go around these edges and just to clean off as much as you can. This is another reason why having it on a separate tile that isn't stuck down is a good idea, because you can see what you're doing. Okay, and I'm just going to spend a teeny bit of time just cleaning this up. Almost done. Okay, There we go. And now remember, we are going to be putting a backing onto that, so if it is not completely perfect, that's fine. Okay, so you can see there how nice that looks. I am probably actually going to end up putting resin inside here so that we end up with a really nice reflection. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And so yeah, we're going to put this into the oven for another half an hour at Primrose recommended temperature, and when that is done we will apply our backing. We will clean up the sides, put it in for another final bake for 30 minutes, and then we will move on to giving this a light varnish. We might just use some Renaissance wax just to give it a light shine, and in here we're going to be putting in a pool of resin. Okay, so this just came out the oven. So I'm just going to lift this off of the tile. It's still quite hot. Okay. Just get that out of the way, that can cool somewhere. Okay, and here you can see how it looks. At the back you can see it has that shiny finish, so we need to clean it up. The edges also need to be cleaned up. So what we're going to do is we are going to give this a moment or two to cool, so that we can start working with it. Okay, so I've let this sit for a little while. So now I'm going to bring over a little bit of black liquid clay. And I only want a little bit, and this will just help our backing stick. And that was just some black liquid Sculpey. I'm just smoothing it over the whole surface, and this will create a little bit of a stickier surface for our piece to stick to. Okay, so I'm going to bring that over, and let's place that over the top. Okay. Now I'm just making sure I'm getting rid of any air bubbles. Okay, then I'll flip it the other way around. I'm quickly going to trim around this. This doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Then I am going to smudge these edges down. And because this is slightly warm still, this should be very easy. And this will smooth out that side. So just do that the whole way around, like so. Okay. Then run your finger along the edge, just to smooth it out and get rid of the fingerprints that would be present after that. And there we go, and then I'm just going to check to make sure that I'm happy with this, because if I have, for instance, put my finger in it and made it so that there wasn't enough of a texture in one place, I could easily go back and retexture it. And I might just do that actually. I'll flip this and press, like so, and that will just give it a retexture. And I will just smooth along those sides just to make sure that they're nice and even. Okay, and there we go, we've got a nice back that matches our front. The sides are pretty nice and clean. And so now I'm going to pop this onto a piece of printing paper before I put it into the oven. And then I'm going to bake that for another half an hour. And then once that is done, we can start varnishing the outside and popping our resin onto the inside. Okay, and so it is out of the oven. So now I'm going to first use some Renaissance wax just to buff up the outside. I'm just going to pop a little bit on. You don't need a huge amount because you don't want to clog up that texture. Okay. And this is to seal the paint, but it's mostly to give the piece a little bit of a shine. And I'm also going to apply that to the back. Okay. And then we're going to use a buffing oil. You can buff it using a soft rag, but buffing oil of course works best. and I might buff it a little bit more off camera, but basically it's just to bring out the colour and just to give it a light sheen. Okay, so I did a little bit more to give this top part a touch more of a shine. So now I am going to use some UV resin, and I'm going to apply that to the inside there, and you can see how beautiful that looks. And I'm just going to spread that around, and now I don't need it reaching all the way to the edges. Just going to spill that around. You can use a brush, of course. But there we go, we've got a pretty good cover. And now once you've got that nice sheen on it, like that, you want to put that into the UV light for roughly about 15 minutes, just to make sure that it is completely covered. Or completely cured, I mean. And then when that's done, we can finish this up. Okay, and so it is out of the UV light, and you can see how beautiful and glass-like that is. It's a really nice contrast to the textured outside. So now we're going to move on to the assembly. So I would recommend using an eye pin for this next part. If you ever look at the previous one that I made, let me just show you. You can see here how unintrusive it is to the pendant. It's not like a big bail that's sitting up here. You don't have to put a bail on the back, which means that it's going to be sitting nice and flat. And just in general, it's a small part of the design. Okay, so I just want to decide how I want this to sit. There we go. And now this first part can be a little tricky because you need to kind of twist it in until it sticks. And now that's not quite in the right spot. This over here will be more the right spot. Okay, so I'll do this a few times until I get it stuck. Let's see if that's the right position. Grabbing it with a pair of pliers can actually help you get it into the right spot. Okay, there we go. Let's check. Pretty happy with that. When you're happy with the spot, continue twisting. You can twist the pendant or you can twist the pin. Generally I find twisting the pendant is the easier course to go. All the time pressing down on the eye pin to get it to press into the clay. Okay, and there we go. That's pretty secure. Okay, and I'm just going to pull. You should not be able to pull it out. You can pop a drop of glue on there if you want, but in general I find that it is fine. You don't have to do that. Okay, and then you can either just string it straight as it is there, or you can use a bail. And I'm going to use this one. Let's have a look here. I'm actually going to turn this so. Okay. Lift up this little pot here. And I already have a ready-made rubber cord here, so I'm just going to make sure that I put that through the bail first. There we go. Then close that, make sure it's nice and tight, like so. And there we go, there's your piece. Very easy, it's a nice way to string your piece. This still has a design element, but it's not interrupting the circular shape of your piece. If you wanted to, if you were going to be using a really small cord, you could even just string the cord straight through the eye pin. I mean, you could turn it around and then you could string it like that, but I am using a fairly thick rubber cord, so I needed a bail for that. If you do not like this, you can always go with the typical pinch bail effect. There are two other options that you can use. Let me just show you those quickly. The first and easiest would be to grab a bail such as this, where it's got kind of these pinch sections. You'd grab a section of your pendant, you'd have to go deeper than this, grab it and then pinch it over the top. However, that does mean that you are going to be interrupting the shape of your piece. Another thing you could do is use a stick-on bail. You would apply some glue to this part over here and stick it to the back, but again that means that it's going to be sitting on your back. Whereas this one, it's just on the edge. It's not going to be interrupting what your back looks like, and it's not going to be interrupting what your front looks like. So I think with this design, this is the one that I prefer to go with. Now let me bring over that one that I showed earlier, because if you want to make this, I just want to quickly explain it. This technique I have shown already on my YouTube channel. It's basically where you take a silkscreen, the brown parts of the silkscreen, and then you use some alcohol ink pens to colour in these pieces, and that's white clay. So that's basically the veneer that we have over here. And then in the background over here we have basically just some yellow and green alcohol ink, and then I sprayed 99% isopropyl alcohol over that a few times so that it dries out the clay, and then I crackled that, and then I just put these little embellishments inside. So you can see that it is basically the same design but with different veneers. So you can play around with it and have fun. This one also, something that I didn't do on this one was this one, the back veneer is completely hidden, whereas this one you can actually see that I have created an edge with the back veneer, so that with this little frill shape, so you can try that out as well if you wanted to. So feel free to play around with this design. There are a lot of different variations that you can do to create varying pendants, so play around with it and see how many different ideas you can come up with. Also keep in mind you can make earrings. You would just want to make a smaller version of the pendant. Generally I would go with the pendant because it allows enough room to see your technique, but you can make earrings as well. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below, and as always I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.